Welcome back to News Dose, everyone. We've got Kojima teasing some brand new details for his upcoming OverDose game. It wasn't just Kojima though, because DoubleFine, the creators behind the 2022 hit platformer Psychonauts 2, they are also teasing some details for their upcoming game. Staying on topic with Xbox, we also have some rumors and speculation about an upcoming January 2024 developer direct, much like last year where they showed off some of the games releasing in the year and shadow dropping Hi-Fi Rush. People are speculating that there is a developer direct January this year on the 25th. We also have news according to an industry analyst who is predicting that the Switch successor is going to be an iteration rather than a revolution, much like how the 3DS was to the normal DS. We'll go over the details later in the video. And lastly, Sony was hit by a massive €13.5 million fine in France for breaking antitrust laws in regards to third-party controllers. Right, first up we have Hideo Kojima and the details he has for his OverDose game. This is what he had to say over on Twitter. It seems I have been acknowledged by creating games that go against the current of the time, such as hide-and-seek games where you sneak into a building without being detected by the enemy, or delivery games where you enjoy moving around in an open world. For me, the most experimental game was defeating vampires outside your house using actual sunlight around you. It was met with fierce opposition from the staff and even within the company. In that sense, OD is just as different. He's referring to a Game Boy Advance game here titled Boktai, which had a solar panel on the cartridge itself that would absorb the sunlight in the real world around you to defeat the vampires in the game. Now, the theme I'm seeing here is creativity, not being bound, having freedom to do and introduce new mechanics. And I believe Kojima and Game Pass go hand in hand. There's a weird synergy there that allows him to be creative. Now, Game Pass, we know, gets rid of a lot of barriers. One of the big ones is the money you spend on games. We know games cost $70 now, and a lot of publishers don't want to invest in games that they don't think will sell. And part of the process is not introducing too weird of a mechanic or mechanics that go against, as he says, the current of the times. But he's known for Metal Gear Solid, which at the time propelled the stealth genre forward, if not inventing the stealth genre himself. But as I'm saying, Game Pass allows him to be creative because you don't have to worry about how many copies you sell. And because you're not worrying about how many copies you're selling, you don't have to worry about what mechanics you could put into the game, what features you could put into the game, what narratives you could put into the game. We know Fortnite is one of the biggest games right now, and that is the game that introduced the Battle Royale genre. And look how that took off. At the end of the day, I want Kojima to be creative. I want him to have his freedom. I want him to create the game he wants to create and not be bound by archaic metrics like copies sold or amount of users playing his game. Just make a game that you want to make. Put your blood, sweat, and tears into it. A lot of people are saying this is the spiritual successor to PT because he did tease a lot of the PT stuff in his trailer back during the Game Awards. If this is anything to show us, it shows us that he isn't bound by anything, that he is going to think outside of the box, and he is going to creatively push the gaming industry forward as a whole. Next up, we have DoubleFine. Over on Twitter, they are teasing a brand new game for 2024. There is at least one project in development, but there could be two, considering a lot of these studios balance and create multiple games at a time. It is possible that there are two projects. A lot of fans are speculating that this could be Kiln. Over on Twitter, Tim Dog says that DoubleFine's game is Kiln and it's been cooking for a good while. He was told by a extremely good source it would be at the Xbox presentation June of last year, 2023, but much like South of Midnight in 2022, it could have been a cut and indeed something that we could see at the Dev Direct this month on the 25th. He says that this is the benefit of having 35 studios with clear direction as well as working on many projects. There's just too many games to be able to put into an hour and a half long show. So some things do get cut. But if it was cut, that would mean it's closer to show than it was last year. And if it is closer to show, then that means it is closer to release as well. Now, if we go look at the DoubleFine website and type in the word Kiln, it says that it's a multiplayer team-based brawler focusing on creating unique player-sculpted characters featuring crazy physics-based animation and destruction. You play as a mountain spirit, which is supernatural beings forever at war on the summit, and you'll use ancient pottery wheel to create warrior golems called vessels, inhabiting them and enabling you to interact with the physical realm to do battle. Created during the match, extremely diverse character shapes and sizes are possible, each exhibiting unique attributes and controls that leverage the possibilities in procedural animation. Now, it sounds very creative. I've used this word a lot in this episode so far, but that's what Game Pass allows. Creativity, freedom, thinking outside the box. To me, from the sounds of it, it's very similar to two titles. One was called Bleeding Edge, which was a Ninja Theory multiplayer brawler that I enjoyed. I played and I thoroughly enjoyed, but it wasn't very successful and it was shut down. The other thing is Overlord back on the 360 generation, where you were an overlord, an undead that would create beings, and it was very sort of a brawler as well as tactical and a mix between the two. But it sounds like a combination of those two things. I personally would like to see what this game is about. DoubleFine have a very unique art style and they capture that so perfectly. According to rumors on the internet, Xbox could be holding a developer direct much like they did in January 2023. Teases TV, a Spanish YouTuber, had this to say over on Twitter. Xbox is setting the stage for a new developer direct event following in the footsteps of the successful start of 2023. At the upcoming event, expect fascinating presentations with new news about titles already announced. But here comes the main dish. I am told that during this event we could witness a new shadow drop. Now there's a few points I want to touch up on. Firstly, if it is true and if this does happen, it would mean that Xbox back-to-back for 2 years straight provided a developer direct at the start of the year. And I think this would be good going forward because it would act as a good roadmap to inform the players, to open up that communication channel, to be transparent as to what these games will look like, how they will play, and what we can expect for that year. The second thing is that there's apparently going to be a shadow drop similar to Hi-Fi Rush, which they say it doesn't have to be exactly on the same date, but it could be within a few weeks after the developer direct. Now, I'm not sure what game it could be, but as I speculated, it could be DoubleFine's game. It might not be. We'll just have to wait and see. The main thing here for me is that they're saying that it's going to shed some light for already announced titles. So we're not going to see any new announcements. So it is, as I said, going to act like a roadmap for already announced games. But the interesting thing is that according to the internet, the Australian ratings board rated South of Midnight and Clockwork Revolution, and they only rate games that are going to release within the next 6 months. So those two games could also release in 2024. And if they do, then the lineup would be Horror History Untold, Towerborn, Microsoft Flight Sim 2024, Avowed, Hellblade, Clockwork Revolution, and South of Midnight. Personally, I'd love to see South of Midnight because that game looked so different. It looked visually striking, and I think that's the game I'd like to see more on. But if I am excited for one game, it'd have to be Avowed. I love the Elder Scrolls, Oblivion in particular. I love the dark fantasy setting, so I want to see what they can do in this fantasy world using a structure like Elder Scrolls. Alright, moving on to the big topic of today. According to Dr. Serkan Toto, who's the CEO of Kantan Games, which is a Tokyo-based game industry consultancy, he's predicting that the Switch successor, a lot of people like to call it the Switch 2, but personally, I'd like for it to be called the Super Nintendo Switch. He is predicting that it will retail at $400, which is $100 higher than what the original Switch retailed at, and that Nintendo will most likely adopt the $70 pricing of video games, which is now the industry standard. In addition to that, he says that the next system is also likely to be an iteration rather than a revolution. Nintendo might add some bells and whistles to the device, but it will be similar to the current Switch. To me, as I've said in the introduction, this sounds like what the 3DS was to the original DS. It was still within the same generation, it just had extra added features. Like the DSi, for example, it had a camera built in. The 3DS had everything as well as the 3D functionality, just better hardware overall. The important thing here is whether it's going to be backwards compatible. A lot of people are speculating it will be, but if this is an iteration rather than a revolution, if this is what the 3DS was to the DS, then it will most likely be backwards compatible. And I think that's very important going forward. I'd like to be able to preserve these games. The industry is pushing towards a more digital realm, and I want to be able to preserve these games. I want to be able to go back and play them whenever I want. But not only digital backwards compatibility, but also physical backwards compatibility is important as well. I want to be able to play these games on a newer piece of hardware. But not only that, I want it to run better. I want it to be a higher fidelity, higher frames. And I think that should be something that the Switch successor does naturally without the developers needing to update the game themselves. Moving on to our last topic here, Sony's been fined 13.5 million euros, or about $15 million, for antitrust violations, and this pertains to two infractions. The first one is for the procedures that's put in place by Sony to detect third-party unlicensed counterfeit controllers, and these controllers would frequently disconnect. The infraction itself pertains to how this measure, these procedures, hinder the expansion of third-party manufacturers, because if no one's spending money on these controllers because they're disconnecting, then these third-party manufacturers aren't getting the revenue to be able to expand. The second infraction pertains to Sony's licensing program. Sony has created a criteria to have access to these programs, but they haven't communicated the criteria to manufacturers. Not only that, but these criteria were applied at Sony's discretion whenever they wanted. So it was up to Sony whether you joined or not. The criteria didn't matter. Now, it's no surprise to me because they are also being sued for digital sales. If you don't know, in the UK, when you go to a supermarket, you're able to buy gift cards for PlayStation as well as digital games. However, in the UK, you're not allowed to buy digital games because Sony themselves refuse to sell digital games through, let's say, supermarkets like Walmart or Target, for example. The only way you could get digital products is from Sony's platform themselves. And obviously this is anti-consumer because you're just being subjected to Sony's prices. There's no competition. It's very anti-competitive. Not only that, but to me, Sony locking away backwards compatibility on their subscription service, Sony locking away game trails onto the subscription service, Sony locking away cloud saves to the subscription service, locking all these features that should be free behind a subscription service is just very anti-consumer to me. So it's no surprise to me that Sony is being fined. The fine is so small that it's not going to matter to Sony, but if this does anything, I hope it shows Sony to be more competitive, to be more consumer friendly. Allow for backwards compatibility. Open up your backwards compatibility for older titles. Don't lock game trials away behind the highest tier subscription. Don't lock away cloud saves behind a subscription service. These features should be free. And hopefully they learn their mistakes and adapt, because Microsoft is offering it. And if they want to compete, they should be able to offer these services for free as well. That's it for today, everyone. What do you think about Sony being anti-competitive? Do you think they should open up most of their features and offer it for free? What about the Nintendo Switch? What features would you like to see for the Super Nintendo Switch, or the Switch 2 as the internet is calling it? And lastly, if a Dev Direct is happening in January, what games would you like to see? As per usual, if you'd like to be notified of when I next upload, hit that bell button.